Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of my podcast. My name is Isam Hijazi, and I'm going to be your host. You are currently watching this live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Today's topic will be about data governance for data economy, policy development, and trustworthy AI. Data marketplaces has proliferated with the growth of AI and big data, as the amount of data collected has dramatically increased. Now, whilst there's an opportunity, it's still a complex task to fully comprehend the economics of data, its monetization, trades, marketplaces, and protection within existing legal and regulatory frameworks, especially when new policies are rising. Now, the thing is, AI can probably help in the process to make it easier, but it's also a process that needs to be governed by itself. I'm very glad to be joined today by a very good friend of mine, Milomir Vojvodic, or as known as Milo. Milomir is an expert in the data governance, management, and automation domain. He holds a Ph.D. where he has researched data management compliance trade-offs between data processing restrictions and opportunity, specifically the GDPR use case. He also has researched IT-driven holistic cross-line of business teams, data governance stewardship teams, impact of customer-centric organizational design, impact of change resistance, and leadership strategies. Milo is also an active researcher, and he is also product leader and advisor at Oracle Corporation. I honestly couldn't find or think of a better person who can come to this episode and talk about this topic today. But before we start, I would like to ask you to do simple things. Now, you're probably watching this, live on YouTube or LinkedIn. Either way, please do like this video and share it with your connections. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do subscribe to my channel by clicking on that subscribe button over there. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, please go to my profile, follow me, or add me to your connections. And last thing, since this is a live podcast, you can chat, you can add your comments, and anything that you write will be visible to myself and my guests. So that way we can incorporate your feedback, questions into our discussion, or simply feel free to say hello and where you are from. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Milomir, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining today. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. It's a pleasure to be here today with you.
Excellent, great.
And
Great
good to
have
see
you
you.
here.
Yeah.
Yep, you too, my friend. Milomir, the topic today is something I believe falls pretty much under your expertise, which is data governance, automation, and how AI can play a major role in that. But before we get started into the details of the topic, I just want to ask a simple questions, assuming that maybe somebody in the audience doesn't know what the data governance is about. So can you please start by describing simply what data governance is about?
Yeah, sure. I think there are many definitions of data governance. There are many ways how it can be described. And I think most probably for the topic for today and also for something that brings me and you together, I would still try to put it under the data management. It is also one of the things that can potentially save data management or might be the only one to save it in the future that is ahead of us. So we can start from there. I think potentially we can speak about some formalization of behavior that comes on the top of data management, maybe about how data are being created or used. Another one that I like could be some long-term consistent view on the top of data management. How are data being created and used over the time? Long-term consistent view, not that we have some view of couple of months, then we have a gap and then we see what happened after. So yeah, let's keep these two at the moment. That's a good start for our topic today also.
That's good. I just want to tell you my opinion when I hear the word data governance and what comes to my mind. You tell me if this is the right way of thinking about it or not. When I think of data governance, Milo, I think of things that is relevant to security, relevant to privacy of data. Who is supposed to see what? How can we audit who saw something, or if he should or she should be able to see something or not? Does that really fall under what is known as data governance?
Certainly, yes. This is I would say one of the areas of applicability of data governance. I think we can take it from there. It will also be area where we will discuss it in that framework. I would like to add maybe a couple of more interesting things why it is potentially special, right? Before we go into looking into data privacy and some of the regulations and things that are challenges today in data economy. What also intrigued me to look into that, and when I say it is the one that can potentially save data management, why it is so. Yes, you're right about what you are saying, but maybe that's not the thing that makes it so special. I would add that a couple of other features of it. First of all, it is also an interesting mesh or interplay between software and people, and also processes that somehow eventually worked, right? Before we had many of these holistic approaches in data management trying to even fix data privacy or react on regulations which didn't work, like master data management, analytics and data warehousing. So this one has that special setup that somehow software on its own doesn't mean much unless you have people who have to really rigorously do some work in their area of domain, being in finance or marketing or in some portions of IT. So they have to rigorously maintain that world, and then software might work. But that's not the end, because there is still one more thing missing, which is workflow. And these people between different line of businesses get into conflicts, which needs to be resolved by the workflow. So once you add this workflow, then the whole idea starts to expand. So you suddenly start from few departments and it starts to add more people, more data. And this is why it works. So before looking into security, privacy, and all of these things, we actually just might check this, why this thing is the one that worked in as a holistic approach. And then we can go maybe looking into security end to end.
That's interesting point, Milo. And you know, whatever that you've described, I can think of that we still needed that 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But the thing is, you know, data governance has become more popular recently. What is the reason for that?
Yeah. I think it's just the whole madness with data that we have and the whole explosion of data. And one of other interesting features that data governance comes with, it has this, I can say, ontological nature, right? It travels with the explanation of the data. So it has that sidecar where you actually try to explain the meaning of data, the context of data, and in all this forest of data that we have nowadays, can we think of a better reason why it became so popular? And that can be something that I can add potentially, definitely. Yeah.
Right, right. And if you want to jump into the topic of regulations and all that, I would like to understand what is the connection exactly between data governance and policy development and regulations in general.
Yeah. Well, data come with a responsibility. Today, they pretty much are snapshot of all activities that we are doing and all the things that we are in our digital identities. So there is a lot of responsibility related to data. There is accountability, accountability as a maybe willingness that someone is answerable for something. And data governance has this interesting way how it can distribute different things across organization, across people. One of them is accountability. So acceptance of accountability is one of the areas how data governance is spreading through this system that I just explained about adding more people, adding more data. It's more than that. It is distribution of rights, it's distribution of voting power, and we can take it from there. It is also certainly when it comes to regulation and data, data stopped being internal business only. They start to be regulated externally in data economy, data monetization. We have so many of these data flows going around.
Why? What has changed? I mean, like you said, it was before an internal thing, but now it's becoming an external requirement. What did change from now and before?
Yeah, it is simply data exchange. The amount of data being exchanged outside of companies is increasing. We have this so-called data monetization where everybody suddenly realized the data got a lot of value and they can potentially have revenue. Commercial entities nowadays in this data monetization, everyone is trying to play some game in producing data, aggregating data, presenting data in some interesting way that someone might be interested to get that data set. So then this data go outside, and then we need to look for the ways how we can actually govern it outside of the companies. Potentially it could be easier before, right? You have enterprise is an entity, it has some legal responsibility which you potentially can find a way to govern. But what when you have a lot of this interconnectivity between enterprises? And then again, governance has this interesting feature that it can pass this responsibility and accountability outside. There is so-called policy concept within the governance, which is the way how you develop accountability. It can be operationalized, it can be put within the process map, and you can track the history of data manipulation and if this policy was applied. So guess what? This policy, you can transfer it outside. Once you are done with your own legal way of handling data and you start to do exchange with someone else, you can pass everything what you've done well, and the other one needs to take it from there. So this puts this governance going outside of being completely maybe that, I would say, microeconomical concept which we were handling before within the enterprise, mainly maybe for regulation and responsibility, less for getting some revenue, unfortunately, but now it became microeconomical. It starts to be also very much associated with all aspects of data data dynamics within overall economical and regulatory framework outside. So yeah, coming back when you asked me the definition, you remember how to define governance. Now we already gave so many different aspects. So I hope we are going in the right direction in trying to
we are,
to
and
go in these stages. Yeah.
I'm afraid to jumping of what our conversation should be, but I want to ask you something. Now, since you're saying things have changed. Before we used to have things to be governed internally. Now we need to do governance also externally. Can we use the same methods that we used internally for external data governance, or we need new methods for that? You don't have to answer things in details now, but a hint on that would be nice.
Yeah, that's a great question, Isam, and I think that probably within the context of conversation today and topic today, we are looking for some solutions, right? So the things are getting very complicated outside. As a matter of fact, some of messages that I will try to promote is that actually, yes, some of these major concepts of governance and methods, as you call them, they have a similar way of their applicability outside as well as internally. Yeah, I just use this example of policy, which works well internally as a rule, right? Where you have some certain perhaps two lists, right? On one side you have the set of accountabilities that need to exist. On the right side you have stakeholders, and then you need to map these two lists. You very easily see the gap, and then these policies start to work. There is no reason why we cannot apply this in the chain that exists potentially in this data exchange on the market externally, right? We can have two lists. There are entities and economical subjects and organizations that are being listed. There is the set of accountabilities that flies on the top of them. So we can have the same gap analysis using, for example, this policy enforcement from the governance. I can come back to also one interesting thing we said in the beginning when we tried to define it, right? To add more people. There is this mechanism of the workflow, and like software doesn't mean much on its own. You need to add organizational structure and people who rigorously maintain their own world. Then you need to add the workflow, and somehow this interplay or mesh of three, software, workflow, and people work internally. Again, I see no reason why externally it is like a beautiful mesh that somehow ended up to be a holistic view that worked eventually in data management, why it cannot work in the same pattern externally, right? So there is someone who is rigorously maintaining their own view on data on the gate outside, and when data exits, there is someone else in another economical subject or government subject who has to do the same thing from their own world. So this is how we start to add more data and more people, but now in the chain, which goes externally and between different entities. So answer is yes, and a great point. I'm
we'll come in more details in the next few minutes. I know there's lots of context into that.
Yeah.
But speaking of economy, Milomir, you mentioned that's aspect when it comes to dealing with data, and looking at the landscape currently, there's plenty of organizations or companies globally that are monetizing the data. I mean, you can think of examples like Facebook, obviously, Google, even Tesla. The car manufacturer, they're collecting data somehow, and they're sending the data to their data center, crunching the data, and they are able to monetize the data one way or another by detecting if there's any failures and many other ways of that. So my point here is companies or organizations are starting to realize the value of the data and the economical value of the data. But I think when we introduce, or when data governance is introduced into the subject, there are challenges associated with that. Can you highlight these challenges or talk about them?
Yeah. I mean, the list of challenges that come from the concept of data economy is just really vast. Probably we can try to just pick subset of it that will help our conversation further. Maybe just about what you said, it can be good starting point. The whole thing is about this just increase in value of data and the not necessarily quality of data, but value of data. We suddenly have a really amazing data. We have geospatial data. We have device-generated data. We can do much more things with that, and these are data of a big value that, of course, some of the names that you mentioned started to monetize and started to be interested in that. One of the first. However, maybe just one of the potential problems which we can see on the side of data holders or those who process data is about that who started first, yeah, because one of the economical concerns and completely unresolved challenges that exist today is you have this interesting feature of data which is called feedback loop, that the one who starts first or who at this moment is dominating the market in a way of how much data they collected compared to others has a tendency to go pretty much into monopoly position, because they will be providing just better services and using this data for their potential users. It will be obvious that they provide everything better compared to others, and then they will attract more users, and then these users will add better chances for this company to improve again better products. So one of the potential concerns, this like maybe more microeconomical and on the data holder side, one of the examples I picked up right now is about these feedback loops and actually monopoly and predatory behavior which is not regulated at this moment just because you started first. We can have another example which is close to our topic today. The value of data is increasing even on the other side. There is a big value which comes from personal data. The value of personal data dramatically increased today, first because everyone can collect them in different places. Even me and you probably daily give our personal data by signing up at different places several times. But in all this digital communication that we have, I don't even need to talk about potential damage that someone can do if they hold personal data about you, knowing, for example, when exactly you are going to your ATMs to take some cash, maybe every second in a month and second date in a month, and do whatever you can imagine against you. But there is the whole as well economics around personal data that started to grow. So because we have all this digital communication, just knowing who you are, knowing where you live, where you work, when you are going to travel, it can be made economical damage to the individual. Just one example, let's say you have an application that you are traveling somewhere which looks in your flights, and then you have another application which looks into your taxi that you are using to go to the airport. If there is your flight, which seems like you will catch it, but you are in a bit of a slight risk, maybe you will get your price increased for the taxi by 1.7. And you can see how just through one example, how economical value of all this data increased, that someone will be just generating revenue out of you even on this like a personal individual basis. So I think I just took two examples, run more on this like a data holders and processor side about some unresolved economical challenges. Another one is on the data subjects, talking about the value of personal data. And you ask me how it can be resolved and what can be done and what governance can do. I think it can do a lot. Maybe we need to put something in between, which are these regulations. We have governance as a concept being used mainly as a result of regulation. Unfortunately, today, we would like to, as people, practitioners in this field, to increase it, that there is more proactive view and idea of how governance can actually benefit your enterprise, and then of course social welfare. But regulation is the next one. Luckily, there are some certain regulations which start to look after these challenges in data economy. They are not brilliant at this moment because just the environment is so complex that neither economists, neither lawyers, neither experts in none of these two fields are come up with something great, but they are starting. So there are examples of regulations like GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation of European Union, which handled maybe something similar to that second example that I mentioned around data privacy. There are also other regulations which handled something related to the first example in financial services in Europe. There is PSD2 regulation, Payment Services Directive 2, which also tried somehow to resolve this kind of predatory behavior and monopolistic situation of the enterprises. So as a result of these regulations, then we had governance coming into the picture, and the pickup that we have seen was not that bad, but we would like to promote more idea of a governance actually resolve of being maybe the only one or one of the leading concepts that can react on regulation. Because for us to resolve these data economy challenges, yes, we need regulation, but once regulation is in place, we need some practical way how actually it will work operationally. Right. So governance can do that, yeah, and hopefully we speak about it.
So these are very interesting points, Milomir. So if I understand correctly, data governance in general can be somehow beneficial to monetizing the value of the data, generally speaking. But my question also here, would data governance be an obstacle or something that would slow organization from realizing the value of the data that they have?
If it would make them slow to realize the value of data that they have. I think it can be only opposite. So it can not slow them down to realize the value of data that they have. Potentially, the issues with governance is just that when enterprises look into some initial efforts to resolve their data challenges and they see how vast they are, they just give up, right? So I would say this is the essential thing that backs off someone to try to even look into a whole end-to-end view on the data. Again, the idea of governance can be downsided. The end-to-end view of data is something a bit futuristic that we can look just later. Initially, what we are looking at is really this critical data, and let's try to resolve only critical data elements. And actually, this regulation, even from that point of view, is somehow giving you idea what are these first critical data elements that you need to resolve, and then out of them you have this initial mechanism working, and then you start to add more data and more people flowing around, and finally have your own benefit for the enterprise. I can see even these regulations as being initial cost. They're not so cheap, right? It's so in GDPR, even some numbers that in Europe was spent $200 billion US dollars on the regulation. That this should be used then for expanding this, but for your own profitability. But in short, I don't see that being a challenge except a fear, right? It is some project that looks complex. There is as well a lot of resistance. It's a kind of authoritative data management concept, which creates a lot of organizational resistance, and some people will suddenly have to do something that someone actually commands them to do, or have some policy. So yeah, in short, it can be only good. There are some challenges which are backing off initial steps.
And I think the solution for this, Milomir, would be to have some sort of regulation that people could follow properly. And I can think mainly of GDPR at this point. I would like to ask you, Milomir, how strong or successful do you think GDPR is, and what can we expect in the future or in the coming months?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think GDPR was somehow even seen as a surprise, I would say, definitely to the world of IT, data management, even in the law, as some kind of asteroid which hit the earth. although it was a lot of efforts and many years of preparation in the background. So that's a regulation that is handling that issue of data privacy, and not just that. It comes from European Union. It started to be operational 2018, and besides attempt to look into protecting personal data and resolving some of these data privacy issues, it also had a broader goal and objective to motivate innovation that comes around data, and also to somehow balance economically different entities, data holders, data subjects, in the way how we talked about it. So it has a big objectives. It has a lot of milestones to pass. It is very difficult right now to understand all of the dynamics of data economy. But GDPR definitely is a positive thing. It created a lot of thinking. You could see a lot of copies and mimicking of GDPR regulation across the world. You could see a lot of debate after GDPR is created, even this one that we have today, that people start to think about issues. They also start to look for a resolution. I think the overall idea about GDPR was to trigger this thinking, first of all, rather than maybe provide a lot of punishment. GDPR, I looked as well into some numbers. I think it had around 100,000 cases filed in the last 2 years, where around, if I'm not mistaken, 100 companies get penalized or something like that, which is not much considering the size of the data economics. The idea of the regulation on its own, it's not it's a risk-based regulation. It's not report-based regulation. It's not something that you can just send once a year and then you are okay. Only if someone files some case against you, you might be scrutinized and have to pay something. It is from that point of view operational regulation. So my personal feeling and also feedback from the practitioners in the field is that the enterprises are not compliant. There is a very minority of them which potentially can respond positively on all this. But from that point of view, I cannot say that everyone really is protecting data privacy, that we are definitely successful in how data privacy and personal data protection is handled nowadays. It provided some progress, not enough. There is a lot of work to do about that, but it created a lot of debates, a lot of good thinking and brain power going into all of the challenges. And you're asking what to expect in future is definitely some kind of a revision of GDPR or some additional acts which will one by one try to add more of this resolution, and potentially at some moment not anymore to be risk-based regulation, but something which will be potentially report-based, and then everybody will be compliant. We will be all safe with all our data.
Right. These are interesting points. Maybe before we carry on, there's lots of questions and feedbacks that are coming in the chat. I would like to ask everybody to keep them coming. We will come to these questions at the very end of this podcast. So now carrying on, Milomir. I want to bring an example that of a latest trend that we currently have, which is big data. I would like to ask, what is the role of big data when it comes to data privacy? Is it a concern? Did it create some new challenges for us, or it's just pretty much similar to what we've been discussing now?
So this can be one example that comes to the top of our previous story, right? Even with this GDPR and regulation, which was handling data privacy, how everything is much more complex than that, right? So big data is a good example of it. Although for example, within GDPR, you must handle this personal data. You must have consent that someone gives you agreement that you can take them, or if they don't give you that agreement or consent, you simply must delete them or are not able to handle this data. And you say, let's say, do this de-identification of the data, and you do not simply handle any more personal data, and you are fine, right? But big data is one of the challenges, one of the example of challenges how we just did not resolve this, because big data as a concept with all this more and more advanced analytics, right, and more cross-referencing of data around actually gives a big potential that this data can be re-identified again, and we have many examples of that. I think in the US, if you have a zip code of a person and date of birth, you just go in public database of all voters, and you can immediately have the first, last name, address, and everything about that person, and many other examples. The issue with big data is because it is unknowable, all these re-identification mechanisms that we can have in the future once, let's say, these data are protected nowadays by de-identification. Yeah, so once data are released, simply there is no way to go back. Cross-referencing of some data that you have about me, which certainly do not identify me in the future in all these data trades and data exchanges, our potential for that is so high that at this moment is unknowable. And actually we can potentially even say that absolutely someone will identify me about data that you have about me, although you are protecting my privacy. So just saying we don't handle data about people in the world of this big data means nothing at this moment. So again, just giving a feeling about the complexity and what right now is the next step for us. So one of the next step is actually to see what we do with this challenge, which big data brings to us on the top of GDPR.
When I hear the term big data, I instantly think of also the term AI. And AI has been introduced as a technology or promising technology to solve many of the challenges in many areas. But before we talk about what AI can contribute to the problem, I would like to ask, does AI introduce a new challenge? And there is this term that is people talk about, trustworthy AI. What exactly is that, Milo?
AI brings another complexity to the picture, even to this just example that we talked about right now. AI, we can look at AI from different point of view, right? It's from one way we can look as a next stage of data analytics, right? Although it's more about algorithm building technique than just doing data analytics, but certainly it is increasing our methods in doing this potential data re-identification and violating further data privacy. I think there is this famous example, you might even heard about this, about retailer chain which started to handle data about some girl, and according to what girl was buying, what kind of food she was eating, the AI algorithm actually the trigger conclusion, prediction that it might be that she's pregnant, and then the whole retail chain, in order to keep her as a happy customer and show proactivity, started to deliver some presents for someone who is expecting babies, etc. So I don't know the details of the whole story. I think at the end she didn't even know that she is pregnant, but it turned out that actually she is pregnant. So AI algorithm was even ahead of the information that we were handling in this world.
Is that a bad thing or a good thing? Is it something impacting our rights or our privacy? I mean, AI. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it's a complex question. So AI certainly is a good thing. So we definitely will need a help from AI, and it can serve a lot for us for this social welfare, and especially in processing this big amount of data that are being generated nowadays. But In this particular example, just the technology went so much ahead of us, ahead of achievements that we have in traditional economical and policy and law thinking. In this particular thing, it was a bad thing because we violated the privacy of the person, and we were protected well by this regulation. Let's say this company did not handle any of the personal data about that girl as a start. The AI algorithm made the whole mess out of it. The issue with AI is that we simply sacrifice the AI algorithm. They would do anything possible to for this performance of the prediction algorithm and fairness, data privacy, compliance with regulation, and somewhere there back in the back end, and they will be always sacrificed just because of that AI algorithm that at this moment was really brilliant. So I think you speak about this trustworthy AI. The issue of trustworthy AI is, first of all, this is a good example that prediction was great. We have many concerns about these algorithms as well working around. One of them is just we look so much are focused on the output, right? This performance of the prediction algorithm that at this moment sacrifice data privacy is not the only output. Another output, this prediction or the algorithm, we completely put it in the dominance over the input. What exactly is the input in AI and all this algorithm? We mentioned at some moment that the value of data is dramatically increasing, but what about quality? Quality is not. We actually make a lot of these prediction-based AI algorithms, which have very questionable input. Are these data really in a good quality?
Sorry to interrupt. So this brings me to a question that I would like to have your view on it, Milo. Similar to data governance regulation like GDPR, is there something that would be regulating AI initiatives? I've heard something that's called the accountable algorithm initiatives. Is it something that controls AI usage and govern them?
Yeah. So I think with this trustworthy AI and what we just touched, there is of course this few example about the algorithm on its own and potential discrimination and biases that we can have out of the algorithms. That of course put the whole algorithm under scrutiny.
How so? Yeah. I mean, you've mentioned discrimination from algorithm. How can an algorithm be racist, if I may say so? Can it discriminate between people or products, or what exactly you mean here?
Yeah. One more time, in AI we are always looking into the performance of the algorithm, and we would be looking into clustering. We would be looking into making better clusters, making clusters under any condition in order to help our prediction algorithm. There are many examples about this. I looked into some research. I think it was in Spain, if I'm not mistaken, where they were looking. AI algorithm was basically helping law and helping justice, and people who were in prison to be released out of the prison. They were tracking what is the chance that they repeat criminal act again. Where the list of historical cases somehow put into two cluster people, foreigners and domestic people, foreigners, which were mainly from Latin America, and somehow historical list of historical cases showed, for whatever reason, that these foreigners had a higher rate of increased repeated criminal act. There can be many reasons for that, right? That they are not assimilated enough in the country, or etc. So AI algorithm in this particular case, if you have two people, one of them is a foreigner, another one is a domestic, when it would be looking at the end at the sentence, duration of the sentence, what kind of things you need to do after you are released, and when you are going to be released. If there are two people with exactly the same history, it is just going to sentence more foreign people compared to the domestic person. So again, the dominance of the just our aim to have this prediction. Performance really great. You know that AI is just something that we don't even control in the way how it excels and accelerates, and it gets better. Every new data iteration is reducing false positives. So it is always the best version of itself. But in reality, what we have today in the world, the complexity of human society, of many things that we have in society, just are not in agreement with that. So this is example of discrimination. When it comes to biases, there are many other examples. But again, in the backend, AI always tries to add every single new record to improve the performance of the algorithm, and bias will also just be a victim of it.
So how can this be governed? How can AI be governed?
Yeah. This is even a new topic, even something that at this moment we do not have enough of the achievements, neither regulations, not even close to what was done, for example, in the field of data privacy. So the questions about governing of AI are just being opened up right now. We will need regulation, first of all, and then we will see operationally what in practice can be done. Our topic today is governance, and I'm a practitioner in this governance area. So we believe from this field that actually data governance can help. And again, like that question that you mentioned at some moment, can same methods be used externally like internally? Can same good things that we know worked can be used in AI world, how they are being used in the data world? We believe actually that answer is yes, again, after looking into AI. So we can come up with a concept which we can call model governance, which is not that much different compared to the data governance. You have this context, this meaning explanation that travels together with data. It can in the same way travel together with the model that would be explaining. We would see the history of the data manipulation. Even more, we need help from the concepts like governance and context and meaning and ontology in AI, because it's even more complicated than the data privacy. Just an example, potentially, who is responsible, right? Is the person who built algorithm responsible? Is that the one to be blame about some issues with the algorithm, or the one who implemented it? The one who built the algorithm had no idea about the usage of the model overall, and we can have this again, this proliferation of the reusing. How can we blame that person? On the other side, the implementator itself, he has no visibility into what was built over there. So it's a very difficult and complex question. We cannot actually do anything with the source code in AI, or it's very hard to do it. It's very complex. It's non-readable. And then we need to really look into these sidecars, attachment to the AI, similar things like purpose. What was the purpose of the model built? Who built it? What are the actions that are supposed to be done with the model later on? Whenever the action changes, we need to have that in the history of manipulation. We need to have it in this track, in a long-term consistent view, how model evolved over the time. So if there is a policy that was applied at some particular moment that we say we according to the governance policy, we cannot use as a factor, is it foreigner or is it domestic person in AI algorithm when we start to run it. Let's say we look into algorithm, what are the variables can be our first explanation of the context. And we look into variables and we say, all right, I'm going to put a policy that this, is it domestic or foreign person, must not be used in the algorithm and must be deleted. And policy is there. It travels as a sidecar, as a context explanation to the model. We will see if it was implemented or not. Prove it different if you claim that it was implemented or vice versa. So then at some moment later on, if policy changes, if we are allowed to use that factor, we will have that information in the history of the manipulation. So something like that is just, I can speak about this for a long time, but let's say this life cycle of the model and following the life cycle of the model with some of the governance concept, passing this accountability, accepting the accountability, and of course, the explanation and policy, passing it externally from entities to entities is our way to do that. And we believe truly that pretty much similar achievements that we have done so far in governance are going to work in big portion of cases.
Right, right, excellent. Milo, in favor of time, we've got about 11 minutes left. I've got mainly two questions that I would like to cover with you. Now, on a positive note, when it comes to AI, I'm personally a big fan of AI and what AI can bring to us from value perspective. Obviously, there's a lot of, like I mentioned before, companies around the world that are utilizing not only data, but also technologies, AI, machine learning, in order to monetize the data, have better personalization for the customers or targeting, etc., etc. Now, can AI be used to accelerate data governance itself and play a role there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like your way of thinking. I think maybe in this case we kind of blame the AI and we put too much of a negative context to it. This certainly is not the
positive about AI. Yeah,
yeah. This certainly not is something that we want to do, and there is we need to look into positives of AI. So absolutely, yeah. So AI brings a lot of positive context as well in the world of data governance, like it brings somewhere else, of course, after we pass some of these challenges that are ahead of us that we talked about. In data governance world, AI can be used for many things, for identifying data internally, detect them, do some semantic search on data, recommending us data sets, how we can use them internally, recommending additional columns, how we can see value of data for us internally. AI absolutely can do a lot even on this, let's say after we have policy, we have governance in place, help us protect this data better from security point of view, risk assessment point of view. AI is very fast to react on any potential danger or threat on data which comes from security. There is just simple limitations of humans and analysts which do not have enough time that can react. AI algorithm can be a good one that this policy is enforced properly as a result of a governance work in the security area. And definitely in the whole governance, we have a lot of processes, right? This accountability, communication between people, between different departments, externally. AI follows business processes. It can only make them better. It can make them faster. It can look into bottlenecks. It can make them actionable. It can make them proactive. Seems like that this privacy notice that you sent externally, according to the list of my historical cases, I'm already warning you with machine learning algorithm that it is not going to be followed properly. There are 2 days before the deadline, but I already know because of historical cases, you react on this right now. Things like that. So again, I think the value of AI is so vast and in all fields in governance as well.
Is it something that we can implement now, or we still at the validation phase?
Yeah. Yeah, what we need to do is first definitely digitalization of all these processes. We need to promote governance. We need to promote governance mechanism. We need to promote governance being part of our processes as a result of regulations that will come, and then after we have it digitalized, we will simply make a lot of data. The data will be produced, how everything is flowing around. We do not have at this moment absolutely not enough data that all of these algorithms of AI can help us even in the governance world. Because the level of digitalization of processes that support policy and governance is not that high, although we have GDPR and everything. But let's have a hope. Digitalization first, governance in processes first, and then a lot of help from AI after validations.
Right. Thanks, Milo. I want to end this by 2 questions basically. What can we expect in the field of AI when it comes to regulations and policy development? Will it basically follow the data privacy experience from Europe, like GDPR, for instance? And will data governance in general, play a role in that again?
Yeah. So the whole debate is about AI also started. A lot of things is happening even as a result of GDPR. There are even some articles in GDPR which maybe not that much directly. So many things changed in the last 2 years, and at the moment when GDPR designed and put AI in front end, that there is a need for regulations. We expect again that most probably Europe and European Union will lead the world. European Union is trying to play better, have a better place in all this data economy space. The issue they have is because they are highly fragmented markets, they are not harmonized enough that they can maybe compete with United States. Data economy size in Europe is 3 times smaller than in US, although Europe is 3 times bigger when it comes to population. So it's a lot of activities that Europe is trying to do in order to boost this innovation around data economy, and also around AI. So we can expect something to come up in Europe soon which will regulate this. As a matter of fact, there are ethical guidelines for AI that were published in Europe already 1 year ago, which are just guidelines at this moment about some potential policies. We can expect much tighter regulation, something GDPR-like. We can expect GDPR to be more operational regulation and new AI regulation to be operational, not just risk-based. And as a result of that, then we cannot wait that governance come into the play and do all these benefits that I think me and you mentioned today. And it has potential that can be the only one which can make this micro and microeconomical welfare of enterprises, data holders, data subjects, and everybody in being some kind of a balance and equilibrium and happiness. So yes, governance with all of the methods that are known to us in a way how me and you explained it today can help in AI world as well.
That's good to know. That's good. Let's hope it all comes really quick in order not to do or have something that will go beyond context and do some harm to people, privacy in general. Now, in favor of time, again, Milo, let's go to the Q&A or feedback from the people that we have here watching with us. So start with Sarah. She's saying hello from Sydney. We've got Muhammad. He's saying hello from Sydney. We've got Vinay. He's saying hello from Singapore. And we've got Arshad. He's saying hello. He's data scientist from India. And he's saying data is at the core of the industry and we need to streamline it. Absolutely, sir. And we've got Mu'tasim, I believe, and he's saying data governance is simply the orchestration and management of all data management activities. It is equivalent to project management, I believe, but for data. We've got also Amr. He's saying hello from Dubai. And we've got Denny. He's saying hello from Indonesia. Hello, Denny. And we've got Mu'tasim again. He's saying ISO 22745 is the international standard for data exchange. I think this is when we were talking about data exchange externally. So he mentioned that to the conversation. We've got Robert, and he's saying hello from northeast of England. Hello, Robert. And then he's having some feedback saying we need different methods internally. Also, governance needs to be repeatable, scalable, and sensitive to tribal views. Absolutely true, Robert. We've got Durag. He's asking, so can data governance be attributed with a set of tools, like one attribute to DevOps? Maybe Milomir, you can answer that.
Yeah, shortly. I think it's related to our also final conclusion. So yes, it can. When we talk about governance, we talk about explanations. And as much as we are creative about explanations, context and meaning, as much as we see a value, what we can explain, explanation can be anything, right? So data was the first thing when it appeared. The way how we want to evolve into the world of AI is actually we are changing what we are explaining. We don't explain any more data, but we explain models, right? There is a little bit of a differences, but we still use all these best practices. So again, it can be done the same thing for the DevOps and for the tools. We would be explaining tools. We just need to a bit retweak what would be our explanations, right? It would not be what is the purpose of data, but it would be something which is relevant for us for the tools that are being used in DevOps. So answer in short is yes, but there is a need to do a research, and there is a need to practitioners to put their brain on how actually in the world of DevOps we would be using the governance over the life cycle to improve, automate, and do more. Yep.
All right, great answer. Thanks, Milo. We've got more questions and feedbacks, but unfortunately we don't have time for that. But I promise everybody we will answer your questions after the episode ends offline. We will go to the comments and answer each one of those. Milomir, I would like to thank you very much, sir, for joining me today and covering this great topic about data governance. It has been absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Isam. It was my pleasure. It was good to see you.
You too. You too. Take care. All right, so thank you everybody for joining today's episode. I hope it was beneficial and informative regarding the topic data governance. As usual, I would like to ask you one final simple request. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel by clicking on that subscribe button. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, do follow me. And of course, whether that you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube, do share this with your connections and friends. And hit the like button. It will help me to reach out to more people. And yeah, let's carry on the conversation. Thank you very much. And until next time, take care.